Hello again. Welcome again to Legislative Update. I am Ralph Bohm for Hudson and Litchfield.
I'm Caitlin Kutab from Windham.
And this episode we will discuss some bills that will be coming up in the next few weeks, and a couple of them maybe this coming Thursday. So the first bill has been getting a lot of emails on this, pros and cons on this. It was doing away with vehicle inspections, and I'm kind of, for most of the emails I've been getting has been like 75 for doing away with it and 25 for keeping it. But I noticed most of the 25 have been auto dealers and people working in service station. Of course they want it. So I don't know, I'm sort of up in the air on this because when I first moved into New Hampshire in the 70s, it was twice a year. Now it's, and I remember one time, a week after getting my truck inspected, the brakes went a week after inspection. So inspection doesn't, luckily it was a manual transmission, so downshifting is braking, so that worked. But the problem is if the brake line broke, that was over the gas tank, so it couldn't be seen. So inspections, do they really mean anything? I don't know. I mean, cars last longer now. I'm not fixing them as much as I used to. I remember some cars, I would be replacing the generators and the starters and all that. But now, and I've been doing my own brakes for more than 50 years for everything, and that's complete brake lines and everything else. So I'm sort of an expert on that. But the argument, too, is only 11 states still have inspections. So what do you think?
I'm a little torn on HB 649 as well. I think it's burdensome for people to have to do it every year. However, when we're comparing to other states who don't do it, most other states also have a minimum insurance requirement. And we here in New Hampshire, the live free or die state, we have no insurance requirement for automobiles. So I am a bit concerned if we take this requirement away altogether, that we might have people, with 20-year-old cars that have no brake pad left. They don't know that they have no brake pad left. They slam into another car and they don't have car insurance. And now that other person, is kind of on the hook to repair their own car because this person now irresponsibly didn't maintain their brakes and they didn't have insurance. So while I would like to relieve some of the burden, and I think perhaps certainly exempting some of the newer vehicles for the first couple of years and maybe even pushing it out to every 2 years would definitely be reasonable. I'm a bit torn on just doing it away with altogether because I do have concern that we don't have that insurance requirement. And so we might have people that are not being able to afford to repair somebody else's car.
Yeah. And to me, it's also, I remember one of the people that spoke for the bill was a former head at the DMV in charge of the car inspection places. He was for the bill. Because his argument too was cars last longer, they don't break, and that kind of thing. And still, I mean, a lot of the places inspections are for making work. I mean, my old joke from years ago, you get your car inspected by a place that does brakes, you're gonna need brakes.
Yep.
You get your car inspected at a muffler place, you're gonna need a muffler. I mean, and that's, I remember those years were common. And I remember there was a company called Grease Lightning that was on Amherst Street and other places. I used to get my vehicles inspected there because they couldn't do any of the work. They were mainly for changing oil and transmission fluid, and that was. So if they found something, it was really bad.
I will say one of the more transparent dealerships that I've ever been to is actually Mazda in Manchester. And when they do the vehicle inspection, they actually record it. And they do a little bit of an education piece with it as well. So they'll show you on the caliper, your brake pads have 4/10 left. The minimum requirement is 2/10, so your brakes are okay. And they'll do the same thing on the tires. So you're actually getting to see firsthand for yourself if there truly is an issue with your vehicle. And I think that really would help for making sure that there's the honesty.
Yeah, and for veterans out there, VIP does inspections for free. So you just get an appointment and get an inspection. And if you're a veteran, because I do that for Londonderry, and it's all the VIPs. and they haven't found work yet. I mean, so they're doing an honest job. I mean, and they'll show you, hey, look. And I get my oil changes and whatnot there, and if anything, they say, hey, this isn't going to make it next time. So and even though I'm retired, sometimes finding time to get the vehicles inspected. I get like 3 vehicles I got to get inspected. My 2 Jeeps and my grandson's car, which is mine. But I mean, it's a pain sometimes. And of course, it's the opposite of when you were a kid and it's your birthday, you get money. When you're older and it's your birthday, you pay everybody else money. So and same for my motorcycle, which you got to get inspected sometime in June. I usually do it as soon as it gets warm, whenever that's going to be this year. And I'm right there, and the guy says, oh, you need this, or you don't need. Gonna need brakes next time, and those kind of things. So, but that's not VIP, so I got to pay for the motorcycle. Okay, so I think, and right now it's going to be voted on this Thursday. It came out of the committee tied 8-8, which means it's no recommendation from the committee. So the first thing is ought to pass, and then it'll be. So I don't know. I belong to the New Hampshire Motorcycle Rights Organization, and came out for inspection because of people that don't know how to check their own tires. The motorcycles.
So they're opposed to the
Right,
bill?
they're opposed to the bill. And it's interesting, the chair of the Transportation Committee, which is on, is also a member of the New Hampshire Motorcycle. So I was talking to him right before I came here from Concord, So we'll see. I don't know. I still don't know what I'm going to do. Same with Caitlin, up in the air about that. The next bill, which hasn't they've been talking about it in education, is HB 115, and that's Education Freedom Accounts. Now, everybody says that's a voucher. It is not a voucher. A voucher is that I'll give you money and you, no. In Education Freedom Accounts, if I want to send my kid to a private school, I still had kids, to a private school, the school gets the money. Or if I'm homeschooling, EFA homeschooling, which is different than other homeschooling, EFA homeschooling, I have to have some requirements like having my children tested and that kind of thing. But so if I say I need these books and whatnot, the company that sells the books gets the money, not me. So it's not a voucher. Now my thing is, I look at it this way. The state's requirement is to make sure our children get educated, and not kids, and not everyone learns the same. So that's why I'm for it. Public schools across the country are failing, mainly because of a lot of other stuff they're doing. And so you have young children.
I do, and I absolutely support school choice. I really think it's important that kids are able to go in the environment that best suits their needs. On this particular one, I'm a little bit worried with our budget if we're going to be able to afford it. Because if you factor in $5,000 per kid, we currently have about 5,000 kids that are on EFAs, and then we have an additional, there's about 16,000 kids that are currently in private school, 4,000 that are homeschooled, so that's 20,000 kids. If we've got 5,000 of them already getting the EFAs, if we add in 15,000 kids, when you factor in the $5,000 plus you factor in other expenses, it gets quite expensive.
Yeah, what this bill does, we have EFA now, but you have to have, what, 4 times? Yeah, if you make 4 times less than the minimum, anyway, more, I mean, you can require, now this bill does away with any limit, so anybody can qualify for EFAs. Also, just for a mention, charter schools are public schools. Anybody can go to a charter school. Some schools have lotteries for getting in because there's so many people wanting to go. But that's not an EFA school. That's a charter school. And interesting, it's right now costing like $20,000 a year to educate public school students. Charter schools, that's like 9,000. Yeah, and charter schools only get state money. They don't get any local money. So, yeah, and the thing is, even with EFAs and charter school, the state money goes
With the child.
to where the student is going. So, for example, in Litchfield, maybe 15 years ago, our total school population was like 1,500. Now it's less than 1,000. High school used to be like 500. Now it's 300 something, 340, I think, if I remember right. So, I mean, hello? And yet that's one of the reasons school budget keeps going up, because the state only pays for the children that are going there. So, and yes, there are less children now, and then a lot of the children, I mean, from the 8th grade to the 9th grade, there was a loss because there's a lot of private high schools in the area that people have been going to for years, so that's what loses some of them. But the problem is, we need to the schools need to be more efficient and more academic quality. For example, one of the problems in New Hampshire is every small town's got the school. Now, one of the things they're looking at is another bill, which is for open schools. In other words, you should be able, for example, if I live in Hudson, why can't I send my kids to Londonderry? If Londonderry has the room, and others in Florida, for example, it's county-run school system, so you can send your kid to any school in the county.
I think it's complicated in New Hampshire because a lot of the funding comes from local taxes versus
and that's
state
the problem.
taxes. I think if we can get creative with the budget and we can find a way to pay for it, I think it's probably going to cost us about $75 million a year, so $150 million for the biennium.
Right.
But Governor Ayotte put in to the budget universal school choice. However, it was that for the past year you have to have been enrolled in public school. So this would be kiddos that are trying to leave public school to go to another option, but it wouldn't. It wouldn't apply to the kids that are already in homeschool or already in private school. So it was a little bit of a cheaper option, but I think there's a little bit of unfairness to that too, right? We want to be treating all the kids the same, and why are we going to help out a kiddo that's just leaving but not one that has? So I think we've just got to find a way to get creative with the budget and see what we can do.
Yeah, because, I mean, for example, for like Hudson going to Londonderry is not a big issue. The schools are about the same size. But Litchfield, for example, why can't send my kid to a school in Hudson? Hudson had the room and whatnot. The money would follow the student, and the Litchfield would pay the difference, and that's how that always had worked in the past. I mean, right now you can send your kid to another school if both superintendents agree. And I remember when I was on the school board, we had two families, and ended up it being divorced, and both kids had to change schools because of the divorce thing. Mm-hmm. But we both agreed, no, they can stay where they're at. But it was a mutual agreement, and one kid that would move to Hudson because the parent breakup. I mean, he only lived a block away from the last bus stop in Litchfield, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But those kind of things happen, but both superintendents have to agree on that. And in some cases, in case of a medical or even a bullying situation where the kid can go, the parent pays the difference of if there is a difference, and have to provide the transportation. That's a big issue. Okay, next thing is, you mentioned this one, HB 583.
Yeah,
Medicaid.
So this is Medicaid free and reduced lunch. So currently we already have an opt-in program where if somebody can't afford the school lunches or has a certain financial threshold, they're under that, they're eligible for their student to get free lunch. However, what this would do is if you've signed up for Medicaid, this would automatically enroll your child in free lunch. Now, there's a lot of concerns with this. One, we value everybody's privacy, right? So if you're signing up with DHHS for Medicaid, why should DHHS be sharing with the Department of Ed or your local
Right.
school district what your financial situation is. Some parents may choose, even though they need Medicaid, they want to buy their kiddos lunch and they don't want to be enrolled in this. And really the big kicker with this is that in New Hampshire we have differential aid. And so if there's a student that is currently eligible for free and reduced lunch, we give an additional, I believe it's $2,300 adequacy grant to that student. So while the lunch itself might be free from a federal program,
But
we have to pay that adequacy aid. And so it really could end up adding quite a bit to the budget. They're estimating it might be about $49 million per year.
Right.
And not even just the cost of it, but also just that privacy concern. If somebody wants to opt in and get lunch and they need that help, absolutely, let's get them that help. But opting them into something without their consent, I think that's really a step too
Good
far,
point.
breaking their
Yeah,
privacy.
Yeah, and look, that came out of the committee to kill it because of those reasons. And yeah, I mean, right now too, there's only one person in your school that should know whether or not the student has got free and reduced lunch, and that is the woman or the person in charge of the lunch program or the cafeteria. That's it. I remember years ago when I was on education, I was also playing Santa Claus, and I would at Santa Claus at the high school when they had their Christmas Day or whatever they called it, and the vice principal at the time asked me, "Hey, could you sit in on? We're giving out cards and whatnot to kids that need it," and my question then was, "How do you know the kids need it?" Well, they're on the free lunch program. No, you're not supposed to know that. So I raised the issue. I went to see I wasn't on the school board at that point, but I went into the school board meeting for a private meeting, and I told them the only person, it's not for the whole school to know or the front office, and nowadays with the computerized system, nobody needs to know that. So
I think that's a really important thing to bring up. When I was younger, you used to either be eligible for a free lunch or for a reduced lunch. And
Right.
back in the day, when I was a kiddo, the reduced lunch was 40 cents. So if you were only paying 40 cents, somebody would know. But now, my 4 kids all have a lunch card. So they never use any cash. They just use the lunch card. So nobody
Right.
needs to know, even if you're getting the reduced lunch, that you're
Right,
picking up
right.
that
It's
additional.
in- it's in
just
the
all on the
computer
card.
system,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, now on to something different, now to the committee I'm on, which is Public Works and Highways. And right now we're going over the governor's capital budget. And that's every year, that's an every 2 years, HB 25. And it's what improvements the state thinks they need for building improvements and those kind of things, capital improvements, things that probably will need to be bonded and that kind of stuff. And then the highways, that's the 10-year highway plan, which is next year we do. So this year we're working on. But a couple of other bills we had was HB 578, which on the Everett Turnpike in Merrimack, ever go by that, they're widening it between Bedford and Merrimack. People that live near there want the state to put up a sound barrier. Well, the DOT does the investigation and whatnot. They found that no, the sound isn't that bad, even though people complain. To me, it's like you bought a house next to a major highway.
Yep.
That's like buying near an airport and complaining about the noise. I mean, hello? So it failed mainly because the DOT, you see the sound barriers on different places because they do check for sound and they put up the sound barriers. Again, that's a big money. So that's going to come out as ITL to not pass because the DOT says it's not recommended. Another one, this one is a safety issue, which we did pass in the committee, so we voted on this Thursday. Mile markers on the Kankamangas Highway, the Kank. Yeah. The problem is it's a 30-some mile road. There's no mile markers. There's probably not too much cell phone operation either. You can't get cell phones in a lot of cases along the way. And somebody's broken down or they have an accident. What do? So somebody stops and says, okay, I'll call at the next place or whatnot. They need a mile marker. Where? So we voted for putting up the mile markers. Initially, the bill was only for every mile, but the state requirement federal is 0.2 of a mile. So just like every place else. So initially, to me, that goes through federal property. Shouldn't that be the feds pay for that? But anyway, because the White Mountain National Forest is federal. Anyway. But anyway, that passed. So if you're going up there, you know that's what happened. Next is a good one. HB 131, phones in schools. Now, you've been hearing this all across the country on the news. States are doing away with phones in schools. One of the arguments when Governor Kelly Ayotte brought this up on her thing, and I mentioned to Kelly a couple of months ago, just last month, when our school went up and she was talking to the kids. And I've known her she's got a daughter in the Air Force Academy now. I knew her when she was pregnant with the daughter, because she was the AG and I was on the election law committee, so I knew her. But anyway, but the thing is, I mentioned to her, the last school shooting, in Texas a couple of months ago, it was a third grader that dialed 911. So, I mean, but anyway, this bill doesn't, all it does is tells schools that they have to have a policy. So, what's your policy? Because also brought up by a military mom, a retired military mom, a Navy captain, that said, hey, one of the things was she's overseas and she needs it, and the only time she can talk to her daughter in school was during school time. How's she going to do that if the phone? So this is why it make a school policy. So what do the schools do? I mean, to me, I think the minimum would be if there's any testing, the phone's in a box. Those kind of things. But yeah, that's a big issue, and but nowadays people can't live without their phone.
Yeah, very true.
And I still remember the old movie Clueless. Remember that? And here these girls walking through the school talking to each other on the phone, and they're right next to each other. I mean, Clueless, right? So that's a big one. Next one we have is, this was one of my favorite, HB 446, non-academic surveys. Now, some years ago, when we found out the schools were doing these surveys, and we passed the law, maybe 10 years ago or more, about no. The problem with that is, so in other words, if it's a non-academic survey, like a teacher is trying to ask questions about like race and that kind of thing, no, you can't do that. Parents got to say you can. Now, except for one survey, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is done by the CDC. Now, it's up again. And I brought this up to do away with it and make it opt-in instead of opt-out. In other words, the parent got to say, yes, my child can take that. Last time, 3 years ago, I think it was, it passed the House, the Senate killed it, which for some reason they always do. And this bill is supposedly suicide prevention, says, it helps on that. Now, it's supposed to be an anonymous survey. The first 7 questions on this survey pretty much determine who you are. It asks your age, it asks you male, female, it asks you sex, it asks you it asks you your race. I mean, all those things. And most kids do not take it seriously. So it's not very good data anyway. Because I remember when my granddaughter years ago was taking it, she said, everybody in the class taking it was going, hey, how often you get drunk? Oh, every weekend. Okay. You know, they were asking those questions,
Making a joke of it.
and it was a joke. And I remember one woman that testified about her, when her son took the test, she asked him, well, what did you put down for, and she said, oh, a lot of us said we were 200-pound black females.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, it's a joke. Kids take it as a joke. Sometimes even on their Facebooks, they say, hey, we're doing this. How are we going to answer these questions? You know, I mean, so it's ridiculous. And I think that's something, maybe we should write the CDC in Washington for something they can do away with and save money.
That would probably be a good idea, because I think the argument that ends up coming back from the school districts is that it's really hard to keep track of all of the kids that opt in versus it's a small number that opt out.
Right.
So they've got to keep track of all these names and make sure that they only give the survey to those parents, that
Right.
the children that their parents have
So-
consented. So maybe if they just did away with it altogether, it would just
Right, yeah.
be
The
a lot
thing-
less headache for everybody.
It's the only survey that's an opt-out. In other words, parents have to say, yeah, I want my kid to take this one. So, and how many times, I mean, do you know when any of these things, do your kids come home with the backpack and do they take anything out saying, hey, you need to sign this?
I'm actually curious what grade that they do this in.
It's
because
usually in 10th, 11th, 12th, it's every
Oh,
2
okay.
years in high school.
in high school, because I don't remember ever getting a paper like that from my son ever. So
No,
I'm not
maybe
sure.
it might be
He's-
coming. This
he's
is the
in
year
10th grade, so I'll let you know if I get it.
This is the year they're giving it. So
Okay.
it's been 2 years. So it's, but I mean, it's not, you know, they got people working in HHS up in Concord that go through these, determine, you know, with the suicides. I mean, come on. You know, they don't know who, so what difference does it make?
Exactly.
Well, you know, because nobody's answering these questions. And I look at it this way. If I'm taking drugs, I'm going to answer no on the
all.
drug questions. But one of the arguments, too, it teaches kids about drugs. You know, do you take this? Oh, I can, you know. But then the kids not taking drugs are the ones answering backward. I mean, the opposite. So it's ridiculous, but for some reason, the last time we killed it in the House, it took, the Senate had a 2-hour hearing on it from listening to all these people, police chiefs and that kind of thing, how good this is, because, you know, it's, okay. Okay, the next thing we have is, because we only have a couple minutes left, is lead testing in schools, HB 756. I mean, that's,
So right now, we already have a requirement for all medical providers to test kids at 1 and 2 years old to do this lead testing, unless the parents are refusing. So we already have a law for this. This is an added burden, essentially, to school districts and daycares. What it's doing is it's requiring that when the school districts or the daycare centers admit the children into their district or center, that they have to, in addition to checking the vaccines, they have to check and see if they've been tested for lead. If they haven't, they can still admit them, but they have to give education to the parents, a handout, and say, hey, you know, it's a requirement that you get lead tested. And I mean, that's just a whole extra burden for districts and centers to have to do. And there's really no reason for it, because again, we already have a requirement to have this. And I think a lot of people, when they hear about this bill, they misunderstand and they think, oh, New Hampshire doesn't have a lead testing requirement. Why wouldn't you want to have one? This is helpful to kids. Well, we do already have one. And so it's really just adding in an extra layer of checks and balances, which are really burdensome and costly and unnecessary.
yeah, I mean, 50 years ago, we needed it. I mean, come on. Houses don't use lead paint anymore. You can't even buy lead paint anymore. Yeah, there's old buildings and whatnot that might have it, but, you know, come on. I mean, it's overdone. Next one is, do that. HB 254? Oh, you
Yeah.
want- Okay. End of life. There's got a few seconds on this. In other words, you can get, it allows medical people to give you medicine so you can have help killing yourself.
Yeah, so medical aid in dying. It came out of committee yesterday, 11 to 7 ought to pass. So it'll go out to the House floor. The last time it barely got through the House. I think it got through by one vote, and then the Senate killed it off. So we'll see what happens this time. There were a lot of concerns with it, including
Right.
the fact that it didn't even require only New Hampshire residents to be applicable to it. So it could be kind of like, people coming from out of state who aren't even with their normal health care provider, and that was a bit of a concern. So
Yeah, I think to me, it's, I can't, if I'm thinking of committing suicide, I can't buy a gun if I put that down. I mean, so what's the difference? And chances are people that are very ill that thinking of it have enough medicine
morphine,
to do
yeah.
it themselves. I have enough medicine to do it myself. But I think it's, it's not
another
necessary.
big concern really is that it's normalizing suicide, and we don't want teenagers to then
No.
think this is okay. My good friend's mom used this when they were dying, and so this is an acceptable way to end pain, and we just really don't want teenagers to
No,
have that.
right.
It's just, it's terrible. So
Yeah, and don't need a Dr. Kevorkian in New Hampshire. So anyway, we're out of time, so, and sorry I didn't bring up anything on my laptop, but that's okay. So thank you again, Caitlin, and thank you, people.
thank you for
watching.
having me.